Get the power with your own Power Rangers gloves with built-in Karate Chop sound effects.
In the cosplaying world, replication seems to be one of the key fundamentals that builds the community and its members. Heck, you could say it's one of the very core fundamentals that drives the lifeblood of the Power Rangers cosplaying community. Because almost every helmet is a reproduction of an existing helmet, spandex is a reproduction of the show's costumes, and so on. Anything that comes off as original comes to many people to be dismissed, particularly the likes of Hasbro and Bandai attempting to cash into the replica market. Of course, you can't really leave anything unnoticed when it comes to accuracy. I unfortunately suffer from accuracy OCD, so taste that I have will be heavily selective. For example, I prefer magnets over clasps, glossy spandex over matte spandex. But the reality being that we can't all have nice things, and we can only settle for what we can only afford. However, speaking of leaving anything unnoticed, you can't seem to get over the fact that Kakuzan exists. They primarily specialize in bracing gloves, but most people seem to put their attention to the Sentai gloves. I just wonder how much of the royalties go to Kakuzan, and it's been featured in over 1,000 tokusatsu episodes. I never seem to find any replicas that didn't cost you at least as much as you can take someone out for dinner for the night. Okay, maybe a poor comparison, but body parts cost more than you think. The other caveat being is that it's confusing for newcomers to know how to order these online. To which if you try ordering them internationally, it will redirect you to That's where ET cosplay comes into the equation. Despite being in the United States, and in most instances, it's easier to import from Japan than it is from the USA, at least to Australia for the most part, they were offering Kakuzan styled gloves for a price that was pretty much beats the overall price of a Kakuzan gloves. Make no mistake, these prices may be out of most people's price ranges. I mean, if they're willing to commission a helmet, then why not spend more on other necessities? After all, $55 is a hell of a deal, make no mistake that you'll buy that in a heartbeat. Because I owned the first iterations of the long sleeve gloves for a considerable amount of time, I never really reviewed them on the basis that Barry Evans already did that several years back. Now since this is a new design, I thought we would best take a look at them and see how far they've come. Now we're going to be doing a side-by-side comparison between each version of the ET cosplay gloves. This one here is the white large version, the black one is the medium-sized 2019 version, the silver one is a Uncle Hulk glove that I purchased from AliExpress, and I'm going to take that one out of the picture for now because it doesn't really have any relevance to our current comparison. The red one here is the current designs used by ET cosplay and the overall structure and construction that they're going to be using from the rest of the gloves from onwards, aside from the blacks and the whites, which were in circulation since around 2019 or so. It was hard to pinpoint when exactly these were coming out, but these were being sold on eBay for a hefty price of around about $60 to $50 which equates to about $70 to $80 here. This one here obviously costing $80, and I can definitely see why there were a lot of large improvements and a lot of innovations that were made to justify its price range. If you look at side-by-side comparison, there really isn't much in terms of the much of the differences. The only differences you may see are definitely the much more narrower pattern that is much more show accurate or more accurate to the Kakuzan gloves that you'll probably be seeing on the internet. Of course, Kakuzan gloves being unavailable for most people don't own them, really understand how to order from the website, or they're not sure if it actually ships to their country or whatnot. And these ones are much more or less a little wider, but they definitely do pull off the effect of a Kakuzan gloves being some sort of imitation or whatnot. Starting from looking at the back, you start seeing larger comparisons between all three gloves, and you see the patterns are distinguishably different. This one obviously uses a much more recognizable pattern that you definitely see in the Kakuzan gloves. This one tries to be a more of a royalty-free version that exactly does not look like anything that I've seen from any other leather gloves so far. Although this actually does give a lot of character to its own gloves, being a distinct imitator compared to many of its competitors, even though there aren't really much in terms of competition in regards to Sentai style gloves. The zipper down at the bottom is essentially a new addition. This actually makes the glove a little much less wider, and continues the trend of making these gloves much more narrower, much more show accurate, much more streamlined in comparison to something like on the lines of just slap it on and you'd have to worry about the sleeves once you actually start putting on the pattern. In terms of any other characters like Mega Rangers, they particularly have these zippers here and plain glove. And what eventually happens that you have to install your own zippers, and some people aren't really very well experienced in sewing in leather, so they don't really have the guts to pretty much cut up almost a $70 glove to cut a line between the middle just to add a zipper to make the glove a little bit much more narrow. They're much more comfortable in making much more makeshift compromises that really don't seem to work in the long run. But in fact, it's a risk that they're willing to make. This is a size M, of course. It is labeled at the little tag here, a letter M. Same goes for this one here, letter M, size M. And this one here, there's a size large. Already it's using off-the-rack sizing because that is the universal sizing for almost every single gloves that you ever bought on the market. Now, off-the-rack sizing seems to make sense in terms of gloves because every single person usually does not have that big hands, and usually when you have big hands, you usually order either large or extra large. But someone with really big hands, for example, the one guy from the Simpsons episode where he had to complain about his big hand and writes a whole entire note on his hand anyway. Aside from that, the whole entire fit is a little bit much more difficult with the one on the zipper. Normally with something with no zips or anything, they snugly fit just like that. Now, despite the fact that both of them are identically the same size in terms of the sizing standards, the black gloves just seems to be much more roomier when it comes to finger spacing. It doesn't feel very compact, it doesn't feel condensed, and there isn't that exactly much pressure going out. So what happens is that when you put on this gloves, even though it snugly fits, it's very 100% snug fit. But also at the same time, when you zip it up, not much of a difference, but it's also very hard to take off if you have both gloves installed. Of course, being the large glove, it's going to have a much more spacing in terms of the finger sizing, depending on how big your fingers and how big your hands are. And here's a close-up inspection of the patterns that you would usually see on Sentai shows, or any tokusatsu show in general, or any show that usually uses the Kagazan gloves. And many of the differences I see is that there is exactly 5 stripes that usually go down. There's also 5 stripes, but they're very narrow here. 5 stripes, and they're much more wider on the white gloves. The stitching feels very high in quality. It feels less manufactured and a lot more very handcrafted. And that's what I really like about these gloves, is that they just really feel like one of a kind. It's not like they've been they feel like they've been mass produced as far as the finish is concerned. Really a lot of care and dedication that really goes into this, and I really respect the vision that ET Cosplay really has gone as far as to recreate Kagazan gloves at a very affordable price and very accessible. Like Uncle Hulk's gloves, which are obviously mass produced in high quantities and high numbers, and it definitely feels like the material isn't as professionally well founded. It feels very manufactured, and it just feels very slightly cheap. Although it does stand the durability of time. Unfortunately, this doesn't really work well with many of the cosplays that I wanted to do, particularly Ryusoulger, where there's one color glove here and there usually be a silver glove there. Thankfully, ET Cosplay does have options for Ryusoulger and Dino Fury gloves, which definitely do feel much more professional and much more consistent. This also kind of works as a compromise for consistency, although at the time when I had my gloves, the black ones and these ones here, they didn't really work out so well, and you definitely see the stark contrast and differences. You can definitely get away with this one nowadays because the patterns are very similar in comparison, but it just doesn't really feel 100% genuine. The difference is obviously night and day with ET Cosplay and the Uncle Hulk gloves. These ones just feel much more premium in comparison to this. Although in the inside it just feels a lot much more comfortable, but prone to sweat. It starts to pretty much wear up and starts to become very sticky, and it just really does not have a very comfortable will fit to them once you worn them for several hours at a time. Now you can argue the same thing with the ET cosplay gloves, and yes, I will say that it's pretty much the same reason that you'll probably have discomfort when you worn these for hours at a time. For myself, I would personally recommend these. These are the best replicas that I've ever seen on the market. There weren't many competitors at the time that were pretty much trying to replicate the Kakazan gloves. You have Anarchy and you have Halu trying to do their own things, but they're not even made out of the same leather that they were trying to construct from. It just feels like they were trying to imitate the patterns and then make them into it's almost the same spandex material just to cheapen out the experience. These ones really feel like they are the real deal. It's almost like you have a Kakazan, but it's almost at the same time you don't. That's the strange part about these gloves, is that they almost feel like Kakazans, but they're not. And I couldn't say if it's a scary thing, but honestly, it's probably one of the best feeling gloves that I've ever received in my lifetime. Although I did pay for all these, and that's just to say that I really enjoyed how much money I spent just trying to acquire these gloves, and it was definitely worth the wait. I was scared momentarily that the US Post Office was actually shutting down services to Australia, and I wasn't even sure that they were actually blocking these out to the country, so it's a little side note for consideration there. Now, I say get them while you can, because I'm not sure how long they'll actually be doing these for a while, unless there will be a new version coming out within the next 2 years or so, which would happen to see that these two older versions might be discontinued in the long run in favor of this design particularly. And I can definitely see why this design is much more superior than these two, from a design standpoint and from a manufacturing standpoint, because it has all the bells and whistles that you expect from Kakazan gloves, and it's definitely designed and manufactured much more better than the old ones are, to say the least. Now you're asking yourself, where can I get these? Well, you can actually get them from ET Cosplay's eBay page, or you can message them directly on Instagram for a pair, and they'll actually give you quotes for shipping. They'll actually give you quotes for specific types of gloves that you want. The most default ones you're usually going to get are either white, black, red, and blue. And there are some special ones like green, and then the Ryusoulger colors with a silver and a particular color that you want. And they were planning to actually release yellow sometime, but we don't know if the demand is there unless you actually request that you want yellow gloves. They will actually make yellow gloves. So there's that. We just have to make sure that the demand is there, and we have to make sure that customers are very well aware of this company, and they will be willing to actually make yellow gloves for you if you want that. As much financially taxing as it is in terms of the pricing and the shipping and all the taxes that you actually have to spend to actually acquire these gloves, and despite the fact these are coming from the United States, a lot of import charges are going to come when you're buying these internationally, particularly coming from Australia. Despite all the financial hoops and all the jargon that I have to go through, it was definitely worth the purchase nevertheless. I definitely say you pick them up as fast as you can. Also tell them I sent you there if you watched this video and you were personally recommended these gloves on my behalf.